Isn't it convenient that the Georgia suspensions came after Florida and prior to New Mexico State?
I honestly had to read it a couple times because I wasn't sure if I was going to say that they tested positive prior to that game or they tested positive after the game for a test they took before the game, which is really a touchy situation.
Yeah, this whole thing. We're going to have to do, Matt just got that for SportsCenter today. We are going to have to do a little bit of research tomorrow to find out the whole deal behind that, and then we'll speak more to that subject. Welcome back to The Drive. I'm your host, Aaron Marks. Matt Paris doing a fantastic job on production and handling all of our SportsCenter reports as well. Want to thank the guys from the Coastal Carolina Saltwater Anglers Club. They are looking for your help, guys, and right now we're very busy running a show, but as we get right to 6 o'clock, I will get a link up on Facebook.com, ESPN, the team's fan page that has all the details. And if you want to support them and donate on their cause to help them get to Biloxi for the national championships, you can. We will get to all that. What did Nick write up on there?
Nick got my cowbell joke earlier. He wrote more cowbell on the Facebook.
There you go. Yeah,
so somebody
Nick's in tune with the music a little
Thank
more
you.
than I am. We've already
Thank you,
identified that. Let's go to the phone lines to our next and final interview of the show. I'm excited to have this gentleman on. This is interesting, and there's lots of debates about college football rankings and who's number one and the BCS and things of that nature. But John Houlgate joining me on the line with the Houlgate Rankings, a system started by his grandfather many, many, many years ago before the BCS and everything else, and it's a system that he has begun using again today, and we're going to talk about a couple things associated with that. John, thanks so much for your time. How are you?
Great. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, doing great. Hope things are. You're over there in California, right? Hope things are going well in California.
Actually, I'm in Oregon now.
Okay.
Just moved there.
I gotcha.
Yes.
Well, hey, tell me about this. Is a system that was started by your grandfather many years ago, comparing strength of schedules essentially to one another and identifying who the best teams in college football were. Tell our listeners where this whole thing got started.
Well, my grandfather started this in back around the 1920s, and he grew up in Southern California, and he went to the other USC there, but he had a very keen interest in sports and college football in particular. And one of the things that he did was compile records of all the different teams dating back to the beginnings of the sport. And he created a ranking system that was designed to challenge, if I may say, the conventional wisdom of the day. There were a lot of polls at that time, and there was, just like today, there was a lot of disagreement over who the best teams were. So he came up with a system that was designed to show a team's strength of schedule and rank teams according to who a team plays and what their records were. So in this system, there's two parts of it. One is a letter grading system, which has to do with how many losses you have. So if you are a undefeated team, you are an A team. If you are a one-loss team, you're... Hello? Oh.
Are you still with us there, John?
Yeah,
Sorry about that.
I'm sorry. Something happened there. If you're a one-loss team, you're a B team. You're a C team, all the way down until you get to letter H, which is a 7-loss team or greater, and there are no more grades after that. So those letter grades serve as a weight on the points that you gain or lose, depending on whether you win or you lose against these teams. So if you beat an A team, that A team becomes downgraded to a B team, and you get 7 points. And if you beat a B team, they go down to a C team, you get 6 points, and all the way down till you get to H, which is 1 point. And conversely, if you lose to an A team, that team doesn't lose its letter grade, but you lose 1 point in that. And that goes on down, 2 points for a B team, 3 for a C team, on down to 8, which is for an H team.
So, I mean, essentially, it's a lot of it is based on the wins and losses of your opponents and how you did against those teams that have very few losses.
Correct. And so the teams that beat the teams with the better records tend to rank higher.
So does this system You can't do rankings like preseason. You can only begin to do rankings after games have been played.
That is correct. I like to think of it as a report card. This is how the teams have actually performed, as opposed to what we think they're going to do in the future.
So, what is it about? Is it just because you're ranking teams in a very simple formula with, my wins and losses versus your wins and losses? There's no real projecting going on, but like you said, it's like a report card type of deal that shows a truer indication, in your opinion, of who the top 20 or top 25 teams are?
I think it is. And the interesting thing is it's all very subject to change as the season goes along. It's a constant reshuffling of the deck until you get to the very end of the season, and oftentimes we see a lot of teams that are tied in the rankings, week after week until something else happens. And the other thing too is that when you play against a team early in the season and farther on down the road, they may lose extra games. Well, the points that you gain from beating that team earlier in the season become downgraded because that team is now at a lower letter grade.
We're talking with John Houlgate with the Houlgate Rankings. You can see it online at Houlgate College Football Rankings.com, a system that he has recently brought back. It was something that had been started by his grandfather, was around for a long time, went away for a little bit, but you've brought it back, and you're now doing your rankings each and every week online. Do you hope to get these rankings as part of the BCS formula? They have 6 computer rankings right now.
Well, yeah, that would be nice. I know that they already have a similar scheme factored into their algorithms where they do look at the opponent's win-loss record. So I don't know how that would that fit in, but I could request it and see what happens.
Sure.
But I also like the idea of being able to show a different point of view and maybe spot trends that the other systems aren't spotting.
So I'm looking at it's not a top 25, it's a top 119. You rank the teams top to bottom every week based on their letter grades and everything, but I think the most important factor, most fans are used to looking at a top 25. So when I look at your top 25, it looks a little bit different. I mean, you got a lot of the usual suspects. Your top 5 does have LSU, Alabama, and Oklahoma in it, which despite the loss, there's a lot of rankings that have Oklahoma still ranked very high. But there's a couple things I want to point out and have you explain to us. One is you've got Louisiana Lafayette at number 19 in the country.
Yes.
You have Alabama and Boise State are tied for 3rd, and your number 1 team is Oklahoma State. And so are you ever surprised by these rankings when they come out? Because it's not really you writing things down. There's no opinion involved. Do you ever go, that's interesting, when you finish with the formula?
Oh, it surprises me every week. I'm constantly surprised every time I run those rankings in the wee hours of Sunday mornings, and it's like I'm kind of like a kid on Christmas Day. I can't wait to see what the next present is. and I was very surprised to see Oklahoma State leapfrog, but then when I looked at how it happened, it didn't come as much of a surprise then, because that was largely due to the bye week that both LSU and Alabama had. The previous week, both of those teams were tied for first, and then they took the week off, and lo and behold, Oklahoma State plays a game, wins it, and gets just enough points to leapfrog over LSU and Alabama, which actually lost points due to previous opponents losing games. And in LSU's case, there were 3 of their previous opponents lost, and Alabama had 5 previous opponents losing, and that's where they fell behind Oklahoma State. And I expect that'll again change this weekend with the LSU meeting Alabama.
Sure. So I can certainly understand and appreciate that it's a cumulative point structure. And so if teams have bye weeks, they could falter, but it's all going to make sense at the end with a 12-game schedule. However, I have to throw the question to you. When your grandfather was doing this, we didn't have all these conference championship games going on all over the country. Now you have teams that have a 13th game in some conferences where others do not. How have you thought about that, and how to account for that to make it, because naturally wouldn't the team with the 13th game easily gain enough points to outdo any team behind it?
That's a very good question, and I wrestle with that, but I just continue ranking them accordingly. because you have to also take into account that they are playing an extra game, and maybe because of that they deserve to have get the points. And also, there's also teams that lose those games, and so that's going to affect their outcome. And it also affects the outcome of previous opponents. So when it all comes down, I think last year I had Auburn and Oregon were 1-2 at the end of the season.
Okay.
So it did kind of play itself out. But then after the BCS championship game, interestingly enough, TCU was number 2, and they had finished their season undefeated, and in a way, I think the BCS even agreed with me in where they actually finished in their final rankings.
Well, gosh, I wish in your rankings they would have ended up number 1. That would have made things a lot of fun to talk about. Well, hey, it's very interesting stuff. I've enjoyed going through your site, John. I appreciate you giving us a few minutes. We'll see how it plays out, how you agree with the polls at the end of the season. It's online at Houlgate, spelled Houlgate, Houlgate College Football Rankings. He is John Houlgate joining us to talk about it. John, we really appreciate your time, and good luck as you build this back up.
Well, you're welcome, and thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem. Interesting stuff. There's always different perspectives in college football with rankings and computers and algorithms and all that, and that's the first time I've gotten to talk to one of the computer guys, one of the guys that goes through the algorithms to figure it out. So kind of interesting stuff. I think I feel like the conference championship thing, I don't see that working out every year. I think he maybe got a little bit lucky with that last year, and it was kind of last year there was an obvious 1-2. We had 3 undefeated teams. One was TCU from the Mountain West. I think everyone was in agreement that if we have to pick 2 teams, these were the 2 teams that we're going to play. Right. I would love to see how his rankings end up if we had a bunch of 1-loss teams, or if right now he's got Boise State at 3, tied with Alabama. Kind of interesting. So there you go. Kind of an interesting perspective. His publicist had reached out to us. They're just trying to get the word out, and I was like, hey, this is kind of interesting. So wanted to bring him on for a few minutes. Hope you guys enjoyed that. All right, guys, when we come back, we're going to tell you why if you ever had to become a professional athlete in Pakistan, I don't know, I'm just saying, don't cheat. Don't cheat. It's really, really bad news. Far worse than if you cheated in the U.S. as a professional athlete. We'll tell you about that on the other side. We'll be right back to wrap this whole thing up. This is The Drive on ESPN Radio, 93.9, The Team.